Hello and welcome to this video on business markets versus consumer markets. Here we'll discuss how business markets are different from consumer markets. Business markets are different from consumer markets in four aspects. First is demand, second is types of buyers, third is manufacturer and buyer contact, and finally the buying process. We'll understand this with an example. So in business markets, the demand is derived demand as compared to consumer markets where the demand is direct demand. What it means is, for example, in case of automobiles, the demand is the direct demand from the consumers in consumer markets, whereas for business markets, the demand of one of the ingredients in automobiles, let's consider steel. Now this demand of steel is dependent on the demand of automobiles in the consumer markets. So that is why we say that demand is derived demand in business markets. So a seller of steel actually depends on the sales of automobiles. Next is the demand in business markets is inelastic in comparison to demand in consumer markets. For example, if the average price of all the automobiles increases by 10%, the aggregate demand of automobiles will actually reduce by some amount. This is called as elasticity in demand, as you might have read in economics. But in case of business markets, even if the price of, let's again take the example of steel, even if the price of steel increases, even then automobile manufacturers will not say that now we will start producing less automobiles and that's why we will use less of steel to produce less automobiles. So that's the reason why we say that demand in business markets is inelastic. Demand in business markets is also fluctuating as compared to consumer markets. This again happens because it is derived demand. Like if the demand in consumer markets for automobiles increases by, let's say, 10%, in that case manufacturers may consider different kinds of scenarios in which their automobile sales may increase in the coming quarters. So they may actually plan to produce more automobiles for meeting that higher potential demand in future, which will increase the demand of steel to much more than 10%. This is called as acceleration effect. So a 10% increase in automobiles will actually lead to far higher increase in steel for the business markets. Now next is the type of buyers. In business markets, we have fewer buyers as compared to consumer markets, and these fewer buyers are actually large buyers. That means when they buy large quantity. So that's why we say that in business markets we have large ticket size buyers, and most of these buyers are geographically concentrated. So this means that a lot of business buyers are actually located at certain geographical areas. For example, different industrial parks, different socio-economic zones. So like that, different business buyers are actually geographically concentrated as compared to consumer buyers, which are generally widely spread. Next is manufacturer-buyer relation. In case of business markets, there are multiple sales calls by the marketer to the business buyer, whereas in case of consumer markets, the number of sales calls are less. Similarly, the contact between a business buyer and business seller is mostly direct contact. You do not find many intermediaries in between, whereas in case of consumer markets, there is a long chain of intermediaries. So that's why we say that there are many channel members between a retail consumer and the manufacturer, whereas in case of business markets, this is more or less direct contact. And that's the reason why in a business market, the relationship between manufacturer and buyer is very close relationship. That is the reason why you have highly customized products in business markets rather than consumer markets, where we generally give very standard variants. So we can again take an example of an automobile, where generally an automobile manufacturer produces some 20 different types of automobiles, whereas in case of business markets, the steel manufacturer will produce the steel as per the exact specification of the buyer. So this means for a business buyer who is actually manufacturing automobiles, that buyer can actually ask the manufacturer to produce the steel exactly as per the specification of the steel required by their factory for their automobile manufacturing. If we contrast this with consumer markets, for a consumer, any automobile manufacturer is not going to produce a single car. Okay, of course, we have couple of exceptions. especially in luxury segment where the automobiles are highly priced. But as a general trend, if we see, for any one particular consumer, the automobile manufacturer is not going to create a different automobile. Let's come to the next aspect of difference between business markets and consumer markets. In terms of buying process, in business buying, there are many participants in the buying process. So in business buying, there are different people who act as technical aspects, even senior management, they also get involved in business buying. Whereas in consumer buying, we do not find so many participants in the buying process. Similarly, buying process is very professional in business buying, but if we consider consumer buying, then the buying process is not so professional. Again, if we take the example of an automobile versus steel, using which an automobile is manufactured, the process for buying the steel is actually very professional, where the request for quotations, proposals, and different purchase contracts are actually undertaken. Whereas in case of buying of a car, the buying is not so professional. Many times people just buy on the recommendation of any friend or sometimes many celebrities. So that's why we say that in business buying, there is more professional buying. And that's again the reason why in business buying, the process is slower. In consumer buying, the process is faster on an aggregate basis. So in summary, if we want to understand how business markets are different from consumer markets, there are four aspects. First is demand. In business markets, we have derived demand, which depends on the consumer market. In business market, the demand is inelastic as compared to consumer markets. In business markets, the demand is fluctuating as compared to consumer markets. The next aspect is types of buyers. In business markets, we find fewer buyers as compared to consumer markets, but these fewer buyers are large ticket size buyers, so they buy in volumes. Similarly, these business buyers are more geographically concentrated as compared to consumer buyers, which are more widely spread in terms of geographical spread. And then in case of business buying, there are multiple sales calls, which shows that a business seller is more closer to the buyer and there is more direct contact between the manufacturer and the buyer in case of business buying as compared to consumer buying, and which actually leads to a different kind of buying process in business buying. Actually, many people participate in business buying. For example, in a single business buying decision, there may be 10 or 15 or sometimes 20 people who may be involved, which is considerably higher than in case of consumer buying. So in case of business buying, there is more professional buying, and which also makes the process a little slower. I hope your understanding of how business markets are different from consumer markets would have increased after this video tutorial. You can like this video, you can circulate it amongst your friends, and you can subscribe to this channel, Marketing Platter, so that you get updated for new video notifications also. Click the bell icon so that you remain updated with the new video tutorials that come on this channel. Thank you for your time. Have a great day.